Hey guys, so for the last presentation, I'm going to be covering John Adams. I know we covered him a lot within the last couple weeks in the lectures. Um, so I'm going to give a little background on him, kind of go through some of the struggles that he went through during his presidency, during his time as a lawyer before that. I'm not really going to dive into the whole John Adams and Thomas Jefferson relationship because we covered that a lot over the last couple lectures. So I'm not going to dive into that, but what I'm going to do is give a background on John Adams and then dive into some of the struggles that he went through, giving some quotes, excerpts from his journals, and things like that. All right, so a little bit of background on John Adams. He was born on October 30th, 1735, in Quincy, Massachusetts. As we know, he was a direct colonist, direct descendant of the Puritan colonists of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. He studied at Harvard University. That's where he got his undergrad and his master's. And in 1774, he served on the First Continental Congress and helped draft the Declaration of Independence, as we know, one of our founding fathers. Also, he became the first vice president of the United States and the second president. Early on in his life, his father, John Adams Sr., was a farmer. Um, he was also a Puritan who emigrated from England to Massachusetts Bay Colony. At 16, John Adams earned a scholarship to attend Harvard. As I said before, he went there and studied law, got his undergrad and his master's from Harvard. He graduated in 1755 at the age of 20 and studied law in the office of James Putnam, who was a pretty prominent lawyer at the time. Um, John Adams, his father, actually wanted John Adams Sr. wanted John Adams to go into ministry, um, but that just wasn't in the cards for John Adams. And in 1758, he earned his master's degree from Harvard and was admitted to the bar. And then, so kind of diving into some of the scenarios and situations that he had to deal with. Um, a big turning point in his career. Uh, the Boston Massacre trials was huge. Um, a lot of people, won't dive into this a whole lot, but um, John Adams took on this case to defend um, six men who had killed Boston residents, known as the Boston Massacre. Um, it was an unpopular assignment, and John Adams knew, that it could be beneficial. It also could hurt his career, and hurt his reputation as he's defending these guys. So John took on the case, and a lot of people didn't really understand his motives for that, or why he might be doing something so risky. But he did it anyway. Um, as we know, throughout the lectures, we've heard that John Adams put law above his beliefs, and he believed that every man deserved a fair trial, and so that was probably a lot of the drive behind him taking on this case and defending these men. So the trials didn't take place immediately after the Boston Massacre. There was a little bit of a period of time there. Um, so eventually, we all know the story of the Boston Massacre. So eventually, um, John Adams wins the case for six of the men who were acquitted. The jury acquitted six of the soldiers: William Weems, William McCauley, Hugh White, William Warren, John Carroll, and James Hartigan. They were six of the men that were acquitted of murder, not found guilty. Um, but there were two other men, Hugh Montgomery and Matthew Kilroy, who were not found guilty of murder, but guilty of manslaughter. They did escape the death penalty. This was seen as a win for John Adams, and it was a huge moment in his career. So yeah, like I said, it was a great victory for John Adams. He benefited from the prosecution's weak management in the case and their witnesses and facts. His skill in being a lawyer was just stronger than that of the opponent, and this was seen by everybody and showed his power as a lawyer and the type of man he was. This helped him be his reputation grow and helped him be known as one of the best lawyers in Massachusetts. And then 3 months after the end of the trials of the Boston Massacre, he was elected to the Massachusetts House of Representatives, and that's kind of where his career started in politics. And he obviously, we know he kept growing from there and eventually became the second president of the United States. Um, so I want to read a little quote um, that John Adams had to say about him taking on that role as the defender of these men of the Boston Massacre. It says, this is directly from John Adams. It says, "The part I took in defense of Captain Preston and the soldiers procured me anxiety. It was, however, one of the most gallant, generous, manly, and disinterested actions of my whole life, and was one of the best pieces of service I had ever rendered my country. Judgment of death against those soldiers would have been as foul a stain upon this country as the executions of the Quakers or witches. As the evidence was, the verdict of the jury was exactly right." So that quote right there goes to show, how passionate he was about um, getting this right and making sure that that the judgment of death against the soldiers, that everybody knew that this would have been wrong, and he he was big on every man having their right to to jury and having a fair trial. And that was part of what made him such a great lawyer and probably pushed him through successfully in his career in politics as well. So another big moment that was going on during John Adams' time that he had to deal with, the Boston Tea Party. December 16th, 1773, the Boston Tea Party happened. We know a lot about this story, and John Adams kept a journal that he wrote in quite often, and it was recovered, and we have all these journal entries on file. So I'm going to read from his journal entry on December 17th, 1773. It's a little bit long, but this will help give you a better understanding of his mindset and how he dealt with these things. So it says, "Last night, 3 cargoes of Bohea tea were emptied into the sea. This morning, a man of war sails. This is the most magnificent movement of all. There is a dignity, a majesty, a sublimity, and this last effort of the patriots that I greatly admire. The people should never rise without doing something to be remembered, something notable and striking. This destruction of the tea is so bold, so daring, so firm, intrepid, and inflexible, and it must have so important consequences and so lasting that I can't but consider it as an epocha in history. This, however, is but an attack upon property. Another similar exertion of popular power may produce the destruction of lives. Many persons wish that as many dead carcasses were floating in the harbor as there were chests of tea. A much less number of lives, however, would remove the causes of all our calamities. The malicious pleasure with which Hutchinson, the governor, the co-signees of the tea, and the officers of the customs have stood and looked upon the distress of the people and their struggles to get the tea back to London, and at last the destruction of it, is amazing. 'Tis hard to believe persons so hardened and abandoned." So as you can see from this journal entry, this was a huge moment in history. The Boston Tea Party said it was the most magnificent movement of all, and he amended these people for what they were doing. So going into it a little bit further, Boston Tea Party, because it was such a big moment in history when John Adams was around, and affected his career so much. I'm going to read another excerpt from his journal entries. says, what measures will the ministry take in consequence of this? Will they resent it? Will they dare to resent it? Will they punish us? How? By quartering troops upon us, by annulling our charter, annulling our charter, by laying on more duties, by restraining our trade, by sacrifice of individuals, or how? The question is whether the destruction of this tea was necessary. I apprehend it was absolutely and indispensably so. They could not send it back. The governor, admiral, and collector and the comptroller would not suffer it. It was in their power to have saved it, but in no other. I could not get by the castle, the men of war. Then there was no other alternative but to destroy it or let it be landed. To let it be landed would be giving up the principle of taxation by parliamentary authority against which the continent had struggled for 10 years. It was losing all our labor for 10 years and subjecting ourselves and our posterity forever to Egyptian taskmasters, to burthens, indignities, to ignominy and contempt, to desolation and oppression, to poverty and servitude. But it will be said it might have been left in the care of a committee of the town or in Castle William. To this, many objections may be made. So I know that I'm sorry that was kind of long. I hope I didn't lose you there, but in this journal entry, he's kind of going on about how it was a necessary action. The Boston Tea Party was necessary. If this wouldn't have happened, this is kind of his mindset about it. If this wouldn't have happened, what would have led to? In 10 years from now, it would have led to, he goes on and says, could have led to desolation, oppression, to poverty, servitude, contempt, all these things. It was necessary for the Boston Tea Party to happen, so that these things could be avoided for the colonists and the American people. And that just kind of shows like his mindset about it and how he felt about the situation. You definitely see his career in law. His career in law definitely shaped his views and how he thought about this. As we know, he was a Federalist, and we know the story of his relationship with Thomas Jefferson, being against him and imposing his views. Well, a lot of these views derived from his career in law and things like that. So that's my presentation. I hope it gave you guys a little better understanding of John Adams' mindset during his time and during his career. And I hope you guys may have gotten something from this. I know we talked a lot about him in our lectures, but yeah, thank you guys, and good luck to all of you.